everybody, welcome to Harlow Council, and I'd like to start off with apologies, item 1. We have apologies from Councillor Sitter, Councillor Perrin and Councillor Churchill. Thank you very much.
Councillor Dorway, Shannon Jezza, Tony Durkin and Eugene Harvey.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we get on to item 2, declarations of interest. Are there any?
Not peculiar, I'm County Councillor, right, more than likely.
Okay, and Councillor Johnson?
Likewise, say, don't count.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Item 3, minutes for pages 4 to 21 to be the minutes of the meetings held on the 7th and the 28th of February. Are those minutes accurate? Excellent, you're doing well. Okay, communications from the Chair. Now, I went to the High Sheriff's Awards at Highland House in Chelmsford at the beginning of March, and Rainbow Services won an award there which was given to them by Essex County. So I was extremely thrilled that Harlow was represented in the awards that night. Crucial Crew, I went up to Latin Bush Centre to see the primary schools doing things like gangs, road safety, relationships, good and bad. And it was extremely well attended by the young people, led very well by those that were there to teach them, and it was a very, very informative and very welcoming morning, and it's a very worthwhile thing to do at Harlow. Crucial Crew is extremely important for primary school children to enable them to go forward into the senior level and be more aware than they would have been in some respects. And my dinner dance happened on the 22nd of March at the Rugby Club, and it was a lovely evening. I had a lot of compliments, and I was extremely pleased with the money we raised, and I think everyone had a good time, food, etc., etc. So thank you all those that came, and I hope you did have a great time. But that morning, before we did that dinner dance, we had the spring clean-up. We launched that, and Emma and I, the officer, we collected 2 bags from around St James Car Park, and I think about 24 bags, something like that, were collected. So, thank you everybody that attended that. The weather was fine, and I think we did a good focus for the launch on litter in Harlow. So that was extremely good as well. Now, Livewire, which is raised roofs, they're going to be at the Playhouse in May, and they're the only Harlow-based company up for the People Project Award. And it would be wonderful if people would get online and vote for them, because they do such a tremendous job. They're a major benefit to the town. They're extremely talented, and they really show Harlow up in a very positive and good way. So we need to support them as well. That's all I've got to say.
Chair, can I
Councillor Edwards?
Can I just be clear, Livewire isn't Raised Roof, they're separate organisations, but we fully support Livewire.
Right, okay, thank you. Okay. Item 5, petition from the public, there are none. Item 6, question from the public, there's one. And this is Nicola Pest. Would you like to take the mic there? Do you take the question, the answer from, as read, the question you're going to read out, or do you want to read it out?
I'll take it as read.
Okay. So do you have a supplementary for Councillor Mike Danvers?
Yes, I do. The supplementary question that I have is, why have you held on to the funds for so long? This is to a head of finance. Why have we held on to the funds for so long, and why hasn't the work's gone ahead beforehand?
Councillor Danvers?
Well, thanks for this. I thought I'd actually deal with this at the Cabinet meeting, but I'm delighted to try and answer it again. Monies have actually been outstanding when the developers in Church Langley gave Harlow Council, I believe, round about £70,000 for leisure schemes within Church Langley. That money has stayed within the council funds, and at the end of the day, there have been organisations that have come forward. A few years ago, I was actually associated with the recreation club there, who were looking to actually spend the money. Harlow Council actually provide help with a business plan and so on, as how that money could be spent. But it really is in the hands of the local councillors, I would have thought, to actually give some succour to any of your endeavours. If you actually care to contact our office, we'll be only too happy to actually explore the opportunities to actually... I would personally be very pleased if that money was gone and spent on the residents of Church Lane. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Mr. Cook. Item 7, questions from councillors. If Councillor David Carter like to read out the question, or do you take it as read?
No, I'll read it out for the benefit of the public.
Thank you.
During the Cabinet Overview Working Group meeting on the 14th of March, it was said that although Harlow had inherited covenants stating that homes may only be used by one families, we cannot use these regarding houses of multi-level occupation, as the legal advice is that we would not be able to uphold these. Are these covenants now not enforceable or of any use?
Councillor Ingle.
Well, thank you for your question, Councillor Carter. I was present at the recent Cabinet Overview Working Group when the matter of HMOs was discussed, and I was able to answer members' questions on this matter. The working group has asked for further work by officers to look at further planning regulation over HMOs within areas which will take some time to bring back to the Cabinet for review. The Housing Act 1985 introduced the statutory scheme for right to buy. Section 609 of that Act enables the Council to enforce restrictive covenants even if we no longer have an interest in land. The covenants in question form part of the transfer from the Corporation to the Council and predates the right to buy legislation. It also predates the statutory regulation of HMOs. The covenant would have formed part of the transfers under the first statutory right to buy scheme in 1980. A covenant is in Schedule 3 to the transfer and is worded as follows. A, Part 4, not to use any dwelling erected on the property hereby transferred for the purposes other than that of a single private dwelling house in one occupation only. Applications can be made to vary or modify the covenant. In these cases, the Council has discretion whether or not to enforce or administer covenants. Each application to modify, vary or enforce a covenant will need to be decided on a case-by-case basis. The Council could not, for instance, have a blanket policy to refuse all applications. Any enforcement via the courts or tribunal would need to be looked at on the merits of each case. This includes the cost of the action to be taken, the chance of success and public interest. The legal advice given consistently has been that a decision to enforce a covenant would need to take into account all the evidence, the HMO's compliance with the regulatory framework and the cost of the public purse if the landowner successfully appealed the matter. Decisions on the enforceability would need to be on a case-by-case basis. I am happy that the covenant enforcement issue is addressed to the review by officers.
Councillor Carter, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, bearing in mind what you just said, what is the legal status of other covenants in Harlow and are they enforceable?
I'm going to get back to you on that, Councillor Carter. I'm not a legal expert.
Thank you.
Item 2 on this, Councillor Andrew Johnson, do you take your question?
No, I'd like to read my
Okay.
question.
Thank
To the Deputy Legal and Portfolio Holder for Housing. How many of the 100 plus homes completed to date at Atelier, the joint venture between Harlow Council, Home and Countryside, are affordable and in which categories? Social rent, affordable rent and shared ownership.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you very much, Chair. In response to that question, as in 31st of March 2019, a total of 137 homes have been completed and handed over by Countryside. This covers properties in Phase 1 and Phase 2. The split is as follows. Private sale 69, social rent 17, affordable rent 27, shared ownership 24. The total scheme will deliver 343 properties over 3 phases. The split for these will be private sale 143, social rent 92, affordable rent 73 and shared ownership 35.
Do you have a supplementary, Councillor Johnson?
I do, Chair. I'd like to thank the Deputy Leader and Portfolio Holder for his answer. But given that one of my colleagues, Councillor Hardware, was talking to an occupant of a shared ownership property in this development just at the weekend, and he disclosed the fact that he had moved into that property from Bishop Stortford, can the portfolio holder tell us how many of the 137 properties have gone to Harlow residents?
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, without notice of that supplementary question, I haven't got on me now how many of the properties will be in Harlow ownership. I'm more than happy to find out and send the answer on to Councillor Johnson.
Okay. Item 3 on this. Councillor Hardware, do you take your question as read or do you want to read it?
I shall read it out.
Okay.
Is the council aware of the issue of service charges on the Italian development? They have increased many-fold only months after residents have moved in. Residents appear to have been given misleading information when they were considering the properties. As a partner, what is the council doing about it?
Councillor Wilkinson.
Chair, in response to the question, the council is aware of the issues that Home Group has had with its service charges at the estate over the last few months, and as soon as the council become aware, contacted Home Group about this in order to express its concerns. The council has been informed that the high increases in service charges have affected the Home Group service charges for leaseholds that affects approximately 70 households. Home Group have undertaken their own internal investigation to establish what has happened and why, and are looking at how they will resolve the issue. The issue has been escalated up to their chief executive level, and they are communicating directly with the households affected. The council will continue to liaise with Home Group on this matter to ensure it is resolved.
Councillor Hardware, do you have a supplementary?
I do. It's a lot more than 70 that are affected, but I just want to check that the marketing materials for the remainder of the properties have been amended to show that the service charge is much higher than it has been previously. There's a question.
In summary, the council are aware of these service charges, and unfortunately there is no legislation that local authorities can control. These authorities are private companies and what they charge people. I share the concerns of Councillor Hardware. I share the concerns of the residents involved. It is, I think, an absolute disgrace that companies are allowed to do this to residents in Harlow, and that is why the council have taken such a serious stance on it.
Councillor Johnson, you have a question, the Deputy Leader.
I'd like to read it, please, Chair. The council has planning consent to build a block of flats on the former Lister House site. What percentage of these will be social rent, affordable rent and shared ownership, and so how many will be sold on the open market?
Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chair. In response to this question, as set out in the planning application, the scheme is currently due to provide 32 open market homes comprising of 15 one-bedroom apartments and 17 two-bedroom apartments. This equates to 69.5% of the development. 14 social rented homes comprising of 7 one-bedroom apartments and 7 two-bedroom apartments. This equates to 30.5% of the development. As part of the viability process, the council is looking to how it can provide additional affordable housing on this site.
Councillor Johnson, you have a supplementary.
I do. Given the £14 million roughly of reserves that the council has at the moment, can the portfolio holder guarantee us that the Harlow Council will provide more additional affordable housing on this site?
Councillor Wilkinson.
What I can guarantee is this administration will always maximise the amount of social housing provided on every site, and I welcome the opposition's sudden concern for social housing. But saying they have a track record of never supporting, and then finally 4 weeks before local elections, suddenly want to start providing support for social housing. And yes, we have, as we've always provided that guarantee. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we stop the interference, please, when someone else is talking? Thank you very much. Councillor Hardware, you've got a question for Councillor Markham.
Yes, why did you refuse the offer from Essex County Council last year to match fund highways improvements when last week you announced some small-scale parking schemes in Harlow? Do you not agree that the town has missed out on some vital additional cash, in effect doubling what you are going to spend, just because of your political dogma?
Well, thank you, Councillor Harlow. The offer from Essex Highways arose from the government dispersing additional funds to county councils specifically to address, there's an error there, specifically to address existing road maintenance schemes. It was given to Essex County Council without strings attached. The decision to only give it to those councils who could match fund it was made on a whim from Councillor Bentley, and this offer was made without consultation and after budgets had been settled. My response was more measured than your question suggests. I wrote to Councillor Bentley urging him to meet with me to discuss the matter and to seek a way forward. Councillor Bentley declined to discuss the matter further. Harlow Council was not the only council to feel that adding strings to a government grant was unreasonable, and that requesting a further £100,000 from Harlow Council for Essex County Council to honour its legal requirements to fix our roads was unfair. Other councils also declined to participate in what could colourfully be described as an Essex Highways robbery. These councils were Basildon, Conservative, Braintree, Conservative, and Malden, Conservative. In conclusion, your question is based on so many false premises, it's difficult to answer.
Councillors.
I did not refuse the money on behalf of the council. In fact, I urged Councillor Bentley to give it to us, but without strings, as the government had attended. The County Council never had any intention to double the money Harlow Council intends to spend. They wanted us to double the money they had been given by the government to spend. My decision was not due to political dogma, as shown by the three other Conservative leaders who reached the same conclusion that I did.
Do you have a supplementary, Councillor?
Thank you for that response. Although the government did provide additional monies for potholes, which has been spent, and potholes are now improving,
Get bigger.
there was an additional offer made for match funding on a separate budget, which was made to you, which you apparently offhand refused. So basically your response is to a different, I don't recognise the other fund you're talking about. But the important thing is that apparently this has happened for the last 4
Do you
years.
have a supplementary
Yeah,
question?
this is the question. This has happened for the last 4 years. So my question is, how many times in the last 4 years have you accepted this additional money without any strings?
Councillor Ingram.
Essex County Council received 85% of all the money that Harlow collected council tax. That 85% is provided to Essex County Council to provide us back with services. A few years ago, Essex wanted to turn off Harlow's streetlights. We decided to keep them going because that's what residents wanted. That cost us £95,000 of additional money that we are already paying Essex for. The Conservative government has cut police numbers. We now had to spend £100,000 on community support officers to make good Tory cuts. You really cannot expect Harlow Council to keep funding, making up the funding cuts that Tories make for services which we should already be provided with.
Okay, now on to item 8, motions from councillors. Affordable housing is the motion they're dealing with. Councillor Ingle, you're proposing this, and second, Councillor Danforth.
Thank you, Chair. Before I start, I'd like to move an amendment. If you look at the final paragraph of the motion, it says the Council urges the Leader of the Council to write to the Secretary of State. I'd like an addition put in there, please, where it says the Council urges the Leader of the Council and the Leader of the Opposition to write to the Secretary of State and learn something of the problem this is causing.
I'm happy for him to accept our amendment as moved.
Accept it.
But I think, you know, we did move such an amendment.
Councillor Johnson, my error, I'm happy to accept that amendment.
Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Councillor Stanley, do you second this?
I do second that, Chair, yes.
Okay. Right.
So, Chair, I can do nothing more than actually read the words of this motion, because I think it sets the scene very, very clearly. This council notes that Harlow's emerging local plan was predicated on the assessment that 30% of all developments should be available for affordable housing, and that this proportion is needed to meet Harlow's housing demand. Some recent development proposals have made no provision, or a ludicrously low provision, of affordable housing. These proposals are often supported by independently sourced viability assessments paid for by the developer. These viability assessments usually show that affordable housing is not viable at the 30% level in Harlow. I'm thinking of two schemes, one which offered 4% of social housing and one that offered, on a £25 million scheme, no social housing whatsoever. All development schemes must be assessed against defined criteria, but this council notes that if planning is granted, schemes with less than 30% affordable housing, our local plan will fail and our housing need will not be met. This council also notes the high rate of refusals that are overturned at appeal, taking little notice of the affordable housing need, and the result that the schemes go ahead and expose the council to possible punitive costs and risk of special measures. And the council has been fined. The council urges the leader of the council and the leader of the opposition to write to the Secretary of State, and I am happy to do that.
Councillor Curtin, do you wish to speak now?
Yes, Chair, thank you. Over the last few days, and in fact today was the last day, the local plan inquiry has been held in this chamber. Today, in fact, they considered policies of this council going forward for the next plan period. Included in those policies is our requirement for social housing, which every other council in the country have as well, to varying degrees. Our neighbouring councils have the same level requirement as we do. Because in giving planning consent, we actually increase the value of somebody's assets, and we require them to reimburse the community in various ways for giving that planning permission, accepting that extra numbers to come into the town. So it's not just about buildings, it's about the community. We need, in order to generate enough housing for our own needs, for our own housing list, we need social housing to be provided as part of any development. Now, before the present guidance, which the leader of the council referred to, a developer would come along and say, we want to develop this particular site. The council would then consider the application and inform the developer what benefits they would expect the developer to provide for the community. The developer would then decide whether it was good enough, whether there was a business case for them to go ahead with that development. Now, the present rules act completely the opposite way. These developers use specialist consultants to prove that they don't have to provide any community benefits. They bid up the price of the land, they then add on their own costs, then they add on their own profits, and surprise, surprise, at the end of the calculations, there's nothing left for the community. I've been told by planning professionals that it's our fault, because the price of property in Harlow is too low, and therefore there's not enough money to pay for any benefits to the community. If only we lived in Cambridge, they say, it's great. The price of property is so high, you can have anything you want. Well, that's unfortunate for us, isn't it? We've just got to suck it up. The reason we brought this motion to the council is for the council to reinforce their commitment to this policy. Because as the leader said, we have to occasionally, if applications don't satisfy our criteria, we have to reject them. And in that case, we need to show that this council is firmly behind carrying on these policies. It's not an option for us, it's a necessity that we provide enough housing in this town for our community's needs. And one of the ways we must do that, apart from our own efforts, is to require developers. So I'm hoping that we will unanimously support this motion and reinforce our planning policies. Thank you.
Thank you. Open it up to debate. Councillor Cart.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was originally going to propose an amendment, but I've had that thunder stolen from me. But just before I go on, I would like to clarify one comment for the members opposite. Certainly, whilst I've been the shadow housing portfolio holder for the last 5 or 6 years, we have always supported social housing in Harlow, and probably longer. I wouldn't be doing the job if we weren't doing that. Turning to the motion and the amendment, yes, we have to agree the present planning processes are skewed, to put it mildly. Council Purpose has been through the reasons why, or the explanations provided by the developers as to why they can't do it. But one of the things I've been waiting for, as well as social housing section 106, elsewhere developers will have to contribute to the community investment fund, which we haven't actually imposed. So there should be, we could argue that there is more money available in Harlow than there may be elsewhere. What Councillor Purton also mentioned a few months back at the local plan working group was, I think it's Hertfordshire have actually come up with a proposal to have a joint viability assessment, which both the developers and the council plug into. There is a set process, set procedure, so everybody can see from the outset what the outcome is likely to be. Why that's not been pursued, I don't know, but possibly it can be. But we have 30% in our draft plan. That is where we're going, and developers need to be aware that that's what's in our local plan. And if they're not prepared to conform with our local plan, then they're going to have to try a little bit harder.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone else? Councillor Highway.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was at that planning, or some of those planning committees where we came forward with substandard offerings. In my day job, I deal a lot with planning applications, see a lot of developers and what they do around the country. And I have to agree, there is a need for social housing in all forms, and we have to provide it. We're going through a local plan process at the moment, which specifies 30%. We're in danger at the moment of not being able to provide that, which is just not right for Harlow. But going back to the local plan process that we're going through at the moment, I have read, or tried to read some of our local plans, it's quite a big document. What other people are doing, and Councillor Carter alluded to it, is involving developers at a much earlier stage to discuss viability. But what others are doing are taking the sites that are in their local plan and doing a preliminary viability study themselves, so there is a starting point. So I'm just asking whether we have actually done that with our local plan or not.
Okay. Anyone else want to debate, or should we go back to Councillor Ingle to sum up? Okay, Councillor Ingle.
Well, look, I'm very glad for what appears to be unanimous support in trying to draw a line at the 30% of social and affordable housing that this town needs from our local plan. The problem, I suppose, is, and the concern is that every time we turn down a planning application, whether it be for that reason or anything else, we're subject to appeal. If our development management committee turn down too many and too many are overturned on appeal, we could be put into special measures and we'd lose all control. And every time a planning application is overturned, we stand the risk of being fined. It's a really iniquitous position that this council finds itself in as a result of some pretty poor legislation that I believe came from Eric Pickles in 2012. There we are. I'm just leaving the vote.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Ingle. Can we now come to the vote on this motion? Do councillors agree with the motion that's been put before them with the amendment of the opposition leader being involved in the writing to the Secretary of State? Agree. Okay, I think that's unanimous. Thank you very much, councillors. Okay, now we come on to item 8B, libraries. Proposer, Councillor Tony Edwards, seconded, Councillor Jodie Dunn. Councillor Edwards.
First of all, I'd just like to move a small but important amendment under which it reads, this council notes that, and then small figure 1, Essex County Council, and it should then read, have not adequately responded to the letter of concern. They have responded, but in our view, not adequately.
Is everybody happy with that? Okay, agreed. Okay, thank you. Councillor Edwards, would you like to carry on with the proposal?
Councillors will recall...
Seconded for this. Councillor
Dunn.
Okay, thank you.
Councillors will recall the council meeting of the 18th of December, where we unanimously agreed that the council leader and the opposition leader would jointly write to County Councillor Barker, Essex County Council's portfolio holder, expressing our shared concern about potential library closures and requesting a meeting. Councillor Mark Ingle and Councillor Andrew Johnson jointly wrote 2 eloquent letters, the first on the 7th of January and the second on the 7th of March. But as yet, there's not been an adequate reply to the points made. Neither has there been a response from Councillor Barker to the request for a meeting, other than to say that such a request should come from county councillors. Councillors and the public may also be aware that following receipt of a petition from over 57,000 Essex residents, Essex County Council held an extraordinary general meeting on the 10th of March. What you may not know is that during the 3-hour debate, over 40 county councillors from all over Essex spoke, some for the motion, some against, but all with a passion for their libraries. But not one of Harlow's county councillors spoke. Shame. It was as if Harlow didn't exist.
Shame.
I could understand them opposing the motion, but to say nothing at all about the potential plight of the libraries in our town, when we could lose 3 out of 5 libraries, arguably defies belief. I hope they will be willing to share their views with us in this debate. Now, some figures to give the context to the debate. These are not my figures, they are the county's figures. In 2011, the Essex County Council library budget was 25.5 million. In 2018-19, it is 12.9 million, a reduction of approximately 50%, significantly more if you take into account inflation. So what has been the specific impact on the Harlow? It has resulted in a 45% drop in the number of books available. 2007 and 8, it was 127,000. It is now 57,600. The total number of library hours has also dropped from opening hours from 182 to 150, a 17.6% reduction. So it cannot then be a surprise that book borrowing has reduced. If you'll excuse the pun, it's the oldest trick in the book. First the county council run a service down, and then they say people aren't using it. And to exaggerate the deceit, they also fail to record all of the alternatives but complementary ways people are still continuing to use the service. And then, to add insult to injury, they devise a flawed weighting process which arguably fails to take sufficiently into account deprivation, numeracy and literacy indicators. And ultimately, they arrive at a situation whereby they propose to potentially close 2 Tier 4 libraries, Mark Hall and Ty Green. Ty Green, by the way, is the third most used library in the town and has the highest percentage of aged under 19 users. And Great Parndon, the second most used library in the town, they downgrade to a Tier 3 community library, which will only survive if a partner can be found to host a significantly reduced stock, take on any revenue costs and provide the necessary volunteers. It will run on even less hours and there will be no computers or other technological support supplied by the county.
Councillor Edwards, could you start winding down?
I am winding down. Again, it defies belief. Nevertheless, the County Council are pressing on with that agenda, which will mean that instead of having a properly staffed library for every 17,500 population, we could have one for every 43,000 population. As we as District Council are not statutorily responsible for this service, we must nevertheless continue to advocate on behalf of Harlow residents because of the potential social, educational and economic impact these service cuts will have throughout the town, to say nothing of the health and well-being agenda to which the county subscribes. So this resolution asks, and this is the final paragraph, so this resolution asks that we again write to express our concerns. It urges all councillors to sign the letter and support this motion and the council's previously agreed position, and for those district councillors who are also Essex County councillors to do likewise when the matter comes before them for a decision. Thank you.
Councillor Edwards. Councillor Dunn, do you want to reserve your right to speak, or do you want to speak now?
I'll reserve my right.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards.
I rise to say I'm very happy to support this motion tonight. And of course, Councillor Edwards said that the Harlow County Council didn't say anything in the chamber. Well, we all know that mostly the chamber is theatre and the work gets done behind the scenes, whether people like that or not. I and my fellow colleagues have had 2 meetings with the Cabinet Member for Libraries because we're that concerned. We have lobbied the Cabinet Member. We have now got another meeting booked with her on the 14th of May because we're still concerned. Having said all of that, as we all know in this room tonight, Essex County Council have declared that they've got 22,000 pieces of paper back from all sorts in Essex to say what they think about their libraries and what they feel Essex County Council should do to give a full and comprehensive service. They are wading through that at this moment in time. I know that, yes, because I'm a county councillor, and they won't have an answer till probably June because they don't want to make any mistakes with the fully comprehensive service. And as for me, Councillor Edwards, as members will or will not be aware in this chamber, there is a long-standing convention at Essex County Council that the chairman and vice chairman do not participate in political discourse during their term of office, remaining the independent arbiters of the business in the chamber. And he knows at the moment, as a Harlow councillor, I'm the vice chairman of Essex at the moment. However, be assured that the work goes on behind the scenes outside of the theatre, or the chamber, as we like to call it. And I'm proud that I have put petitions in front of that on behalf of my local schools, and anyone that's written to me, I have forwarded that email on and had responses from that and put them back. Thank you.
Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I thank Councillor Edwards for his most eloquent speech, although he gets a lot of the facts wrong. If he remembers rightly, on the 18th December at the meeting here, I made it quite clear of my opposition to any closures and my groups, not my groups, but our opposition to it. So to keep regurgitating lies is not correct. It's not right. This is a consultation as well. It's still this consultation is finished as such, but the results haven't been known. So we can't make any decisions until we know what the results of the consultation. as Councillor Johnson just said. Anyway, I'll go on from there. I strongly believe that the leader of this council has a duty to enter into a meaningful and constructive dialogue with Essex County Council over the matter, despite the consultation is closed. The leader and his group need to get off their protest mode and engage, not to protest with no ideas, but as I've said, meaningful and constructive dialogue with the leader of Essex County Council or Councillor Susan Barker over the future of Harlow's library service delivery. Instead of protesting, use the time to put forward some constructive, alternative proposals for a modern, fit and purposeful library service that Harlow and Essex can be proud of. Have you contacted schools, voluntary groups, possibly formed a community trust? There are various solutions that could work. I'd like to put one forward. Over the past few years, this council has been squirreling away large sums of taxpayers' money. Yes, it's the taxpayers of Harlow's whose money this is. 14 million is now stuffed in our reserves. Residents may well ask, why does Harlow Council need reserves of this magnitude? Only they can answer. My suggestion is quite simple. Why does this council not use some of these reserves to help maintain or modernise Harlow's library service? If needed, because the result of the consultation is not yet known. But what is known is that one of the library premises in Harlow, the Stowe, is owned by Harlow Council, and Essex County Council library services are charged £13,000 a year for the use of these premises, plus rates. Why not come to an arrangement whereby these premises are rented at a peppercorn rate? That may well secure the library for the future. Madam Chair, Huddersfield District Council has declared an interest in running the whole of their library service. So why not Harlow? So, Councillor England, I ask that some of the taxpayers' money be used to support our library service, which will benefit all of the residents in Harlow. So come on, Councillor England, get off the streets of protest and into the real world, which is collaboration, not confrontation. We may not be shouting and protesting, but we have been lobbying the Cabinet portfolio holder and a meeting with Councillor Susan Barker in early May. Councillor Johnson has already said this. I will continue to lobby on behalf of Harlow's library service in a considered and constructive manner.
Councillor Mason.
Firstly, I make no apology that I have been on the streets of Harlow and on the streets of Chelmsford and attended at least 2 public meetings because personally I wanted to engage with the families and the children, and I spoke to reams and reams of children that came up to us and told us what they felt about the loss of the libraries. So I make no apology for that at all, because actually we were visible, and what was not visible, I'm afraid to say, despite all the assurances tonight, was the alternative parties, apart from one public meeting, as I understand. But as Councillor Edwards said, this is, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, isn't it? A number of years ago, you stop providing the books, you mess around with the hours and the days, and gradually, people become less interested in attending, and, when they arrive, it's closed. So it's not a surprise, really. And don't forget, this is, we are paying council tax, and Essex County Council have a proportion of that money that actually is for libraries. So before we start raising the kind of 17% of what we have in Harlow, let's look at what Essex County Council should be doing. And this is all in the backdrop, I'm afraid to say, of austerity, because let's not forget, actually, as I've repeated many times, from criminal justice background, it was Chris Grayling that denied prisoners' books. We want to rehabilitate people. Thank goodness Mr. Gove actually turned that one around. We're seeing the sort of effects of academisation. I went past Ty Green Library the other week and was really excited to see 3 classrooms of children coming out of the library, because this is an essential part of the education of our children. Have we forgotten that? You know, I mean, we knock on the door in Todbrook, the Todbrook Ward, Westfield, and the parents are saying, well, actually, I know, because my children, the school take them to join the library, and yet we're thinking about changing all of that. So, you know, there's lots I could say about this. You know, we've mentioned previously about the fact that people that are on benefits, that haven't got Wi-Fi, they haven't got smartphones, that have to actually go and register their claims. Some families have to register for school dinners. A lot of that has been said before. But actually, I'm afraid to say, you know, personally, I feel you may be saying grand things and doing things behind doors, but actually it's completely out of touch with what's going on in the streets. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't planning on speaking tonight, but I was just so gobsmacked by the comments from Councillor Garlick, so I had to say something. The very definition of what the councils do, the two-tier, which is complicated enough for our residents, about what local district councils deliver and what county councils deliver, is complex. I would hope that someone that serves on both would understand this, but apparently not. Harlow Council, this Labour administration, has worked really hard to have stable finances, to not have to cut services. If the Tories at County Hall can't do the same, and the only ideas their representatives from Harlow have is go begging the district council, which is struggling to pay for what we do as we do under your Tory guts and government, then what's the point in you and what's the point in Tory Essex County Council? You clearly can't run the government, we can see that. You can't run the county council. Step aside and let a Labour administration do it.
Edward read all my notes.
Thank you, Chair. I too, like Tony, attended the meeting of Essex County Council and heard quite a good debate. Actually, there wasn't one word from the Harlow councillors. Sorry, there were two words, yes and yes. Yes to defeat the opposition motion opposing the closures of libraries, and yes to go down some other route which was unclear. The only other thing, I like Emma, wasn't going to get up. This is Essex County Council's balance on the 31st of March 2018 for reserves, their reserve statement. How much have they actually got in reserves? 1,193,265,000 pounds. For those who didn't quite hear that, 1,193,265,000. That's how much Essex's financial statement for the balances on the 31st of March 2018 exposed the whole situation. This is an authority that refused to increase the council tax for 5 years. They missed out on 80 to 100 million pounds over that time. Now our social services are in a state, our highways are in a state, and they can't even keep our libraries open. It's a disgrace, Chair.
Councillor Harbury.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've listened to all your negativity. A lot of assumptions. Broadly, as your motion says.
Councillor Harbury, Chair, not Madam Chair. Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Sorry. As your motion says, no decisions have been made. And the consultation's only just finished, and the results of it have not been announced yet. I note the comment that we have not been visible. Well, that's probably right. We don't shout about what we're up to. We don't put it on social media. If we do, we get trolled by the Labour Party. So that's why we don't do it. But I can say that I view this whole issue as an opportunity. I've been ignoring the negativity. I see that this is an opportunity to look at our library services and do something for the future. And I've been working with my county council colleagues and we've come up with numerous options that could be considered, which is one of the reasons why we're meeting the Cabinet member next month. We're going to come up with a strategic and sustainable solution which will hopefully retain all of the libraries in Harlow, but not just retain them, make them much better. Now, I don't see any suggestions or solutions coming from the Labour Party at all. And I do get upset with being criticised for not being visible and not doing anything, when lately, obviously, I am. I've been visiting schools, I've been visiting all the libraries, I've been talking to residents, I've been talking to residents' associations. So please cut the criticism.
Okay. I think Councillor Vince.
Yeah, I'll make this very quick. I'm a member of the Labour Party that certainly gets more trolled on social media than does the trolling. I think that's fair to say. No, I'm not making cheap shots. The only real feedback I wanted to give the county council on the other side of the room. A lot of you have mentioned the consultation. I mention this a lot. I know. I'm a maths teacher, and one of my big bugbears is what I call biased questionnaires. I wouldn't say this, well, it's not so much that the biased nature of the questionnaire, I just think the questionnaire wasn't really fit for purpose. I think it was very, very overly complicated, unnecessarily complicated. I think the questions kind of bundled answers together, and it made it very difficult. And the feedback I've got when I do go out counselling and talk to people about libraries is that actually they found it very, very difficult to fill out. So I would say that I'm a little concerned when we do get the results of the consultation, what the results of the consultation actually tell us and how accurate those are. So I would really ask, and if Essex County Council want somebody who can overlook over their questionnaires when they put them out, I'd love to do that. But you don't have to pay me too much. So yeah, just if you could pass that on, because I think that's a big issue.
Councillor Charles.
Thank you, Chair. I'm nice to support my county councillor colleagues who have spoken very clearly tonight for their support for our library service in this town. What I think is really important is to strip this debate right back down to some of the basic principles. Clearly, and I would be the first to argue this, that when you look at the legislation that underpins statutory library provision, it needs to be updated, it needs to change. The Public Libraries and Museum Act is not fit for purpose, and it should beef up the powers given to local authorities to ensure that library provision is maintained in all parts of the country. But we're here tonight to discuss Harlow libraries. And as I said in the debate at previous full council, I used to study in the old Harlow library for my exam finals. I think library provision in this town is crucial, particularly for those individuals that live in low-income families, have not got access to internet, but use the library as a tool to look into the outside world. It also is an important gateway for young children to go and learn to read, pick up fiction, pick up some history, and actually learn about their surroundings and the history of this country and in other parts of the world. It's a valuable service. It is something that all of the county councillors and all of the councillors, the Conservative councillors, cherish. And so that's why our county councillors have been working behind the scenes and have a follow-up meeting with Councillor Sue Barker, who needs to listen very carefully to the concerns across this town about library provision. I'm someone who was born and bred in this town. I know my friends and my family have used these libraries for decades. I'm not someone who would negate my responsibility as a district councillor to champion them. And I think that's important to stress tonight. But this administration has got to come to the party. It's got to be more constructive with Essex County Council. Protests only achieve a certain amount. What you need to do is put forward options and actually get into the debate with Essex County Council. Because let's face it, this is a consultation, no decisions have been made, and actually what we're hearing tonight across the board is a groundswell of support for library provision. But there's a future prospect here of some exciting new opportunities. I want our library service to be an important community hub. In other parts of the country, models have been executed to make sure that library provision is at the source of local communities. And that's what we cherish about our libraries, because it allows people a gateway to learn to read. It allows people to access the internet and see the outside world, as I've stressed earlier. I hope that we can ground this debate in some actual facts. This is a consultation, this administration's got to come to the party, but this group here tonight is in favour of our library provision and will fight for it in whatever means are necessary.
Councillor Dunn and then Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Councillor Joel there, Charles, has just almost stolen all of my thunder. So that's the problem of having a very good deputy. The position of the Conservative group in Harlow, and indeed the position of the Conservative Party in Harlow, has been very clear on libraries all the way along. And it makes me angry, actually, when I've heard reports that certain members opposite have been telling members of the public that the Conservatives in Harlow want to close libraries. Let me say clearly here, that is not true. Harlow Conservatives want to see all of Harlow's libraries stay open. Yes. Stop and wait for a second there so that everyone sinks in. And just to reinforce that, we've had an M. Sorry, what were you saying?
Councillors.
Yeah, Councillor Dan was typical to you trying to interrupt me again. You always do it.
Councillor Johnson, carry on.
Thank you, Chair. We've had an MP, a Conservative MP of the town, Robert Halfon, who has raised the issue of libraries since the County Council announced their consultation multiple times in Parliament, multiple times in questions in Parliament, multiple times in parliamentary debates, seeking to show his support for Harlow libraries. Our group, at the December meeting, was so keen to show our support for the libraries that we asked for the amendment to include it to be a joint letter between Councillor Ingle and myself. A letter which actually I'm very angry hasn't been adequately responded to by colleagues at County Hall. They may wear the same political colour as me, that doesn't mean I have to support everything they do. And I don't always support everything they do. I'm angry that Councillor Barker's view is that a meeting between the leader of a district council within Essex and his opposition leader to show how important it is cross-party to the council has not been accepted because it should be booked via a county councillor. For God's sake, when a leader of a council writes to a county council, a cabinet member, it should be answered and an offer of a meeting should be accepted. Again, we're happy to sign up to this motion tonight. I'm advising all of my members here to vote for it. I want to keep all of Harlow's libraries open. What I don't want to hear after this debate, again, is more rubbish out on the streets when I'm campaigning, that people from other parties have told them that's not the case and the Conservatives in Harlow aren't supporting libraries. We may have a very different style of campaigning on political issues to the party opposite. We may not be particularly used to wandering the streets with placards. I've never actually done it. I don't actually want to wander the street with a placard. But for those that do, I pay absolute tribute to you. If you want to wave your placards, that's great. And it's a wonderful way to engage in political discourse. I prefer to have private meetings and conversations with people and show them the support that I have for our libraries. And again, if the leader thinks it would be useful for the follow-up letter to come from the pair of us, not just himself, I'm happy to offer to sign that letter with him to show that there continues to be cross-party support in Harlow about this issue. That being said, Chair, as we pointed out, this is still a consultation. The consultation results, as we've been told tonight, are not likely to be out till June. I hope very much that the consultation results, which came from across the county, will be of such a magnitude and that County Council will take on the opposition that's been made to their proposals by district councils across the county and by Conservative members as well as Labour members across the county, will lead them to say that the consultation has led to the fact that no library should close. I really hope that's the outcome. But until we get to the point that the consultation has actually been announced, the details of the consultation have been announced, this moment in time, no one in this room knows what county's proposals are. And whilst I understand there's a local election looming and the Labour Party want to scream and shout about something to do with nasty Tories, they're often doing that, we don't know what the outcome will be yet. So we can't say a county are trying to close the libraries. They have asked whether they should. Resoundingly, I'm hearing from the public up and down the county that they shouldn't. And I hope that the County Council administration listens.
Thanks.
Chair. I'd like to start off by thanking the members of the Save Our Libraries Essex group for turning up. I know us from this side are thankful that you're here and thankful that you're out protesting to save the libraries. Thank you for all your contributions. It hasn't told me anything I don't already know from the people opposite, I'm afraid. The listing of library uses doesn't count mother and baby groups, the jobless, those on low wages, school meal applicants. The list goes on and on. These people use the computer services and only taking out books is counted. The aforementioned is disproportionately the poorer in our society. So what I think this looks like is little more than a Tory attack on their ideological enemy, the poor. It's the same old story. It's the same old Tories. Who's dropping who now? The campaign to save our libraries goes on, helped by Sol, who are here tonight. I'm not going to disrespect you, don't worry. This is bringing together people across Essex and beyond in opposition to what is a heartless Conservative policy of cultural vandalism. But what I'll do is I'll finish with a question. If the members opposite are so against the cuts, and let's say the cuts inflicted by their government, which have cut spending to councils by over 50%, do they ever wonder if they're in the wrong party?
No.
Councillor Ingle.
Thank you, Chair. It may surprise some of the councillors opposite to know that I did meet Councillor Barker. I met before the December meeting here in this chamber, and I found her to be woefully ignorant of the services that libraries already provide, and to have quite a tin ear. She was surprised when I spoke to her about computer usage. She was surprised when I mentioned pupils using libraries as quiet areas to study. When Councillor Charles said he used to do that, that wouldn't count in this consultation. You don't exist in this consultation. Your usage, gone. School usage, yes, I have spoken to schools, and they do use it. Doesn't count in this consultation. The consultation is fundamentally flawed because it only looked at a small part of the usage, the existing usage of libraries, book withdrawals, and we already know that the number of books on the shelves has been massively reduced, and the hours available to take those books out has been massively reduced. Councillor Garnett. Well, you are seriously suggesting that Harlow residents should pay twice to keep the libraries open. We already pay. We already pay 85% of our council tax to Essex to provide services. We've had Councillor Hardware suggest we should pay twice for our roads this evening. And of course we're already paying twice for our street lights. This is absolutely the issue that Councillor Danvers rose when he said this is the inevitable consequence of austerity. An ideological austerity that is wholly unnecessary. It's all very well Councillor Johnson and Councillor Charles talking about our MP Halfon voicing his concern about libraries being closed in the House when he has voted consistently again and again and again to cut the public purse. So, in conclusion, we've heard our Tory Essex County councillors say they're happy to support this motion tonight. Good, thank you. We've heard that they've lobbied behind the scenes. We've heard that they've spoken to people. But here's a really, really important question. Will you vote to keep our libraries open when the question comes to Essex County Council? Because that's really where you're putting your money where your mouth is. Thank you.
Would you like to sum up, please?
First of all, I'd just like to respond to one point that was made by Councillor Garnett when he called me a liar. I'm afraid there is absolutely nothing in what I have said that is a lie. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for the apology. Having said that, I've been to a certain extent reassured by the debate this evening. My final paragraph when I was opening, which I wasn't able to get to because of the time limit, was throughout the debate I was going to say I would like an assurance that all of Harlow's county councillors, having previously voted unanimously for the motion in this district council, will now advocate publicly and vigorously for the retention of all the existing libraries and work to ensure that they are adequately resourced and staffed by qualified librarians. That's the model that we want to. I was Councillor Hartware's comment about it being an opportunity. Yes, of course it is an opportunity, but there are some basic lines to be drawn. One of them is that they are staffed by qualified librarians, that they're not staffed by volunteers. I see them as being primarily staffed by volunteers. That's the model that they put forward. Now, if you're going to, if the starting position is no, what we want to do is continue to maintain our libraries, maintain the professionalism that's within the libraries, and then look at the way that we can expand their use and expand their community involvement, then of course we want to have discussions with you and have discussions with the county council. And one of the things I would say to the county councillors is, given, and I totally share what Andrew said in terms of the response to Councillor Barker when she said, no, you have to put the request in via a county councillor. I mean, you know, this is the leader and the leader of the opposition of a district council here that she's talking to. So one of the things that the county council could, because I do think there is some mileage in having a meeting. Yes, there is going to be different models and different, but we need to get across, and I recognise the passion that you've shown tonight in terms of saying that you want to preserve the libraries, just as we want to preserve and strengthen the libraries. So I think there is potentially some meeting ground in us going. We may well have slightly different models, but there may well be some potential meeting ground, and we're jointly going forward and saying to Essex County Council, you know, what you are proposing in your model for Tier 3 and Tier 4 libraries is not appropriate, and it certainly isn't appropriate for this town, given the levels of literacy, given the levels of numeracy, given the poverty levels, and given the deprivation levels. So in some ways, although it's been an interesting debate, I actually think it's been a useful debate, because the public have heard where you stand on the libraries. They already know where we stand on libraries. To think that they know where we stand on the libraries. So perhaps together, in terms of going to the county council, and you know, yes, you've had your discussions now with the county, you've behind the scenes discussions with the county council. Now's the time to actually start involving, you know, the representatives of the district council in those discussions. Because to say to us, oh, you haven't come forward with any proposals, there hasn't been the venue to come forward to those proposals, you know, to have those discussions. And it's about getting those discussions going. And we've got a limited amount of time, a very limited amount of time. Decisions are going to be made the first decisions are starting to be made in June.
Can you wind down, please, Mr.
So, I'll wind down by saying that I'm reassured to a certain extent by this debate, and I look forward to it moving forward now.
Councillors, we'll now come to the vote on this motion with regard to the libraries. Can we have hands raised for those who are for the motion? Okay. I think that's unanimous. Thank you very much, councillors. Okay. We're now moving on to references to Cabinet and Committee, item 9. A is the referral from Licensing Committee, the private hire operator application procedure update. Proposer will be Councillor Stevens and seconder Councillor Strachan. Okay. Is there any debate on this item? Councillor Garnett. Right. Okay.
Chair, sorry. Does the proposer not want to talk first? No, I'll just...
No, I think...
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, sorry. It was just, I know these committee reports usually get nodded through at full council, but in this instance I just wanted to point out something that I feel needs to be considered by members, as I feel it could have far-reaching effect on the lives of some residents in Harlow. At the Licensing Committee on the 12th of March, we were presented with an officer's report on the proposed revised procedures for the grant of a private hire operator licence using commercial and residential properties. I'm really talking about residential properties here. Having dutifully read the officer's report, I was concerned about a proposed change being put forward between the existing procedures and proposed revised procedures. Under the existing procedures, it states that a residential private hire operator may operate a maximum of 2 vehicles. However, under the proposed new procedures, which is before you tonight, for recommendation to be adopted, this maximum has been removed. This would quite clearly allow any residential private hire operator to have as many cars as needed parked in and around his or her residential property. Councillor Nick Church and I objected to this change and asked if there was any new legislation or legal requirement for this change. We were informed by both the licensing officer and our legal officer that there was none. Chair, if this is adopted tonight, it could and probably would cause immense and unnecessary problems with many cars parking in residential areas, adding to our already congested estates. I sincerely hope that Council tonight refuses to adopt this new residential operators licensing procedures, and ask the licence officer to rethink this. After all, do we not have enough problems with parking in our housing estates without promoting more? Now, I'm not sure about how, if I can recommend this be sent back to the officers, or how I can deal with it that way, if there is support.
Okay. Can Councillor Stevens reply to that, please?
Thank you, Chair. This was very thoroughly gone into at the committee, as Councillor Garnett knows, and the guidance we received, the legal advice we received, that national law has been updated and it is no longer possible to differentiate between commercial and residential parking outside of property. If he wishes to go into this further, perhaps we could get him a written answer from the officers on the matter. But it is my understanding that we cannot differentiate in this way. Indeed, if we did, I cannot see how it could be policed. Because taxis come and go outside of all sorts of houses all the time. So how would you know if taxis were parking outside this house, or there were private people parking outside this house? It would need constant observation. So I'm agreeing that this should go forward as it is, because it is in line with the officer's recommendation and legal advice.
Councillor Johnson.
I thank Councillor Stevens for that. Unless she's got the advice, legal advice with her tonight to show members of this side that are not on the licensing committee and were not there that night, I'm going to be advising members of my group to vote against this tonight. And if the administration wants to put this through, then they can do. I am really concerned about the idea of removing a cap on the number of cars that a private operator can operate from a residential area without a very good argument for it. As Councillor Garnett has said, we all know the problems of parking within a housing estate, and as you yourself have said, how would you possibly enforce it? At this moment in time, I believe the only way that can be enforced is to keep the present 2-car cap on that. Now, I know some operators won't be happy with that, and I understand that's an issue. And if there is sound legal advice on which the administration wishes to make its decision tonight, then I'm perfectly happy for them to do that. But as an opposition, we will be voting against this tonight.
Councillor Stafford first, and then back to Councillor Stevens.
Obviously I was there, so we would have known we would have had to bring the legal advice we could have run. But obviously it was there. It isn't new, it isn't existing, it's already existing. So it's already been tested, and because of the limit we've imposed on private hire operators, it's legally not enforceable. That's the real crux of the matter. We cannot enforce that legally. There is already written in the law that there is no legal requirement to have a minimum, which is what we put in. So on legal advice and the papers we were given, that is the only reason. Like everybody else, my concern is about parking. You know, we've been through it, we tested it, and that's where it's at.
Hang on, Councillor Charles.
Just a brief comment, if I may, Chair. Based on the remarks by Councillor Strachan, who has now given a legal opinion, whether or not he chose to, he has given a legal opinion that is forming the basis of the administration's position on this matter. Can we now have some official legal guidance, see whether we were misled by Councillor Strachan in his supposed legal opinion?
We're checking that one out.
Send into the town.
Just accepting actually legal advice.
Yes, I think it was colleagues than the asking for
I'm asking.
I know, yeah, I'm asking you guys to do it.
We'll be in the way of this one.
The committee had legal advice, and I might still vote against it.
Adam's going.
Mr. Rees was at the meeting and he heard the legal advice that was given. So he's quite clear what legal advice was given. So that's as good as we can do this evening. Adam, how can we do that?
My recollection is that the minimum limit of 2 is unenforceable, and by extension you have to allow an unlimited amount. You can't enforce a limit of 2 parked outside a house. You have to allow, it has to be unlimited. If you were to have a amount of, if you were to have 2 vehicles in your licensing conditions, you would likely be legally challenged, and you would not be able to defend that challenge, because the current guidance from the government is that it is unlimited.
Councillor Eddie Johnson.
Can I just say, Chair, that the current guidance from the government is what it is, guidance. And from my point of view, and from other working on highways, if you put something up that's not enforceable, it still prevents people from doing it. And I don't see why we should not have our policy the way it was until someone challenges it. Because someone's not going to challenge this because it's guidance. And our policy is guidance. I'm sure it is guidance. But it's written down and that keeps people in order, I believe. Thank you.
Councillor Purton.
Yeah. Can I just say, Chair, it may well be that this is guidance, but we all know that when things end up in court, it's that guidance that is used. And if we carried on with 2, as has been suggested, and some people were deterred because they believed they could only have 2, and then later on somebody changed it in the court, and it was discovered it was unenforceable, we could then be faced with legal challenges from all the people who've been restricted to 2 over the years. We have to, personally, I think it should be restricted to none. I don't see why commercial activities should be taking place in residential properties at all. But we have to ensure and legally protect the future finances of this council. What we can't do is actually legally wrong for us to take decisions that we know might lead to the council being having to incur expenditure. That's the real situation.
Councillor Stevens, you wanted to come back.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson was requesting.
Yeah.
We didn't debate. I wanted to ask a question, understanding orders to the chair of the committee.
Okay, so you want to ask a question, right?
And is there any reason why, time-limited reason why this has to be decided tonight? For example, do we need to hit a deadline of sometime this month, or could this be referred back to the committee for clarity?
It is my understanding that it could be referred back to committee, and indeed you asked earlier if you could have some written evidence of the legal advice, and I'm sure we can get that to you very soon next week. That might help.
Okay.
But I do point out, these will be very small operators. The main operators are already set up in the town, and small operators may only have a very few cars anyway. But if it became a problem, the matter could be reconsidered then.
Can I come back to a lot?
No.
Councillor Mason.
I share a lot of the concerns. I was at that meeting, and as I recall, when we discussed it, you know, in terms of getting some advice, it was kind of accepted that the way that we could monitor it was with regard to any new applications for operators license. That would be the time that we can say, well, actually, where are you operating from? How many cars have you got, etc. So that was kind of a fail-safe, if you like, because there was also the issue about. I asked, was it good practice that we review in terms of this, and I was told yes. So I just mentioned that because that came up at the meeting.
Councillor Ingle.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for your comments. Councillor Johnson, I share your concerns about the private hire company operating from the residential premises, and I think I agree with Councillor Purton that actually that should not, the limit should be less than 2, not more than 2. I'm prepared to, I think we should refer this back to the committee for further evidence, giving time to provide you with the evidence, with the legal advice. It seems very clear to me from what Councillor Stevens has said that the guidance is clear and unambiguous. However, this is an important matter. We're not forced into a decision by any time limit, so I'm more than happy to propose that we defer this and send it back to the licensing committee.
I'll second that, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wilkins. So, let's draw back on this. Are we going to, as councillors, defer this back to the licensing committee so that we can get a legal definition that we can then put back into full council when that time is appropriate?
Agreed.
How do we, is that agreed?
Yeah, agreed.
Right, okay, thank you very much. Okay, right, we're doing well. Item 10, reports of officers. Item 11, annual reports from councils appointed to outside bodies. That is on the supplementary that you would have received today. Okay, that's fine. Item 12 is for noting, and the only thing on that is item F and H, which again is on that supplementary. So that's that out of the way, right? Okay, back it up. Now, no matter for those of business, but there's a councillor here that will not be standing again in her ward. And I'd like to give a presentation on behalf of the council to Councillor Edward Stevens, because she's done a fantastic job. She's been chair twice, and we're sorry you're going, Edna. And on behalf of the council, I'd like you to receive this.
say now, I've run around and give my phone away.
Okay, you're welcome to come back to the chair's room for...
Oh, it's Andrew's last meeting as well, though.
That's exactly what you just said to that.
It's making problems. We close it.
Were you up for re-election?
Yeah, we
No, no, no.
Hopefully,